So our next presentation is creating a pollinator pathway, 1 traffic circle, 2 front gardens, and 7 parking strips. This presentation is being given by Joey Grossinger and Ofen Joey. So Joey is a 7th grade student at Willard Middle School in Berkeley, and he has led the pollinator pathway project with his brother, Leo. And Ofen Joey is the principal at Second Nature Ecology and Design, advising cities and businesses on ecology strategy. It was a desire to recreate lost habitats of the East Bay, the wildflower meadows, grasslands, and oak savannas that existed here hundreds of years ago, and to provide food, shelter, and nesting areas for the wildlife that depend upon native plants that started this project. Rewilding the neighborhood began in 2005 when neighbors planted coast live oak, seedling and native plants such as gum plant, manzanita, California lilac, and fuchsia in the traffic circle at Russell and Fulton in Berkeley. And it continued 14 years later when tweens and brothers Leo and Joey Grossinger removed the scruffy lawn in the parking strip across the street from their house and replaced it with California native plants. I will turn it over to Joey and Ofen. So thank you for joining us today.
Okay, well, thanks for having us. Really nice to be here. Really nice to be here with Joey. So as Kathy said, we're going to talk a little bit about a project, kind of organic project over the past 3 or 4 years that really Leo and Joey have led in the neighborhood, ultimately creating a bit of a pollinator pathway through our little corner of the neighborhood. And it, as of this morning, actually has 8 parking strips involved because Leo and his friend Ben yesterday and today have been working on another neighbor's strip. So as there we go. So as Kathy said, the project started kind of around this traffic circle in this has been in the centerpiece of the neighborhood. We're here in South Berkeley. Not far from Berkeley Bowl. As she said, it's accessible. You can see where it is for real in the tour 3 weeks from today in person. And so as she said, we planted this tree in 17 or 18 years ago. It was a small seedling that had been planted from an acorn by a neighbor. This is Leo, Joey's older brother, 15 or 16 years ago. And it became, it grew, it was pre-planted with native plants. It grew over time, became kind of a focal point of the neighborhood. It's a little celebratory place where some of the neighbors would actually hang ornaments on the tree in the holiday season. And one year, actually during the pandemic, somebody temporarily put cotton down, which made it really look like it had snowed. A lot of people took selfies, and it was a little bit of a popular pandemic spot for a little bit. But anyways, it became kind of a real source of pride in this. And then when the city had for a stretch there was planning to cut down trees in all the traffic circles, that led to local activism, and the kids got quite involved in this tree and traffic circle, which they had played on and collected acorns from and looked at birds in for their entire lives. And so the idea was going to be cut down was very disturbing, disheartening. So the neighborhood kind of coalesced around saving the tree, and its Berkeley activism prevailed. And so we still have the tree, continues to grow. And then at some point in the last few years, a neighbor across the street, Jesse, commented that wouldn't it be nice if the cool plantings in the neighborhood were extended out, in the circle were extended out into the neighborhood. And he said he'd be interested in turning over his parking strip, which is there, the kind of greenhouse on the right of the image there. And so Joey and Leo offered to dig up the strip and transform it into a pollinator pathway. So over to you, Joey.
Jesse's parking strip was about 80 feet pasture grass and weeds. Leo and I put cardboard down and gradually dug it all out. Jesse and us replaced it with a nice combination of native plants. We selected ones that seemed likely to be tough enough to survive and also be good for pollinators and birds. Some of the plants we planted were California sagebrush, manzanita, Douglas iris, and low-growing ceanothus.
In addition to starting to look really good, people working on the parking strip had this really interesting effect. It drew interactions and engagement from people. Like this is a passerby taking a selfie or taking photographs of the poppies. So people were really appreciative of taking this kind of neglected semi-public space and making it more attractive, more ecological. And we got to know a lot of neighbors through the process who, even though living there many years, we hadn't really got to know. This is Carol, who brought by seedlings of yellow-eyed grass, which had spread in her yard. So we started developing these synergies, and then other neighbors started asking about doing the same thing.
Our neighbor 2 doors up, Michael, had recently put down weed fabric and some white stone. We realized that we could keep the stone and just poke holes through the fabric and plant the same sets of plants. It worked really well because the stones acted as mulch and kept down weeds. Good. In addition, our new neighbors next door asked us to design and plant their parking strip. Leo and I dug up the area again and planted a bunch of plants like California fuchsia. They also extended native plants into their front yard. Then Susie's are on the corner and Don's across the street.
So all in all, these relatively small projects have added up to over 200 feet of pollinator plantings radiating out from that central oak tree. And so it's been really neat to see this sort of synergistic community dimension where, it's great to do things in your backyard. You can do a lot there for ecology, but the front yard and the parking strip have this other dimension where they're visible and public facing. And so what you do there leads to, we've found, community interactions and can kind of have this influence on the broader neighborhood. So I've got really fascinated by parking strips and just how they're this kind of undervalued, privately managed, but public space, which really affects your experience walking also as you start to pay attention to them. And the difference between these just kind of crabgrass, strip zones and the more beautiful, aromatic, flower-filled corridors that we've ended up creating, and they really buffer your experience as a pedestrian from the street, so that you're really walking through something instead of just alongside the cars. And also then this continuity along the block that has kind of tied things together and had, a bigger visual and ecological effect. So that's been really interesting to see. The other dimension is interesting, is that we think about habitat complexes in my work. And this is a good example of kind of a small piece of what one might think of at a neighborhood scale, at the 10, 15, 20 block scale, where you can actually support some of the resident species that you might be interested in, like an acorn woodpecker colony, or the foraging area for bumblebees, or a territory for a chestnut-backed chickadee. And so this is a small piece of what can kind of spread ideally to a bigger neighborhood endeavor, where you might aim for a certain number of trees, and a granary tree for the woodpecker if you're aiming for acorn woodpeckers, continuous pollen and dense, available pollen for bumblebee colonies. We have a nest box in our backyard that's been occupied by the chickadees, and this is about the range that they want. Ideally having a water feature, even thinking about some of the other things Kathy, I know, talks about in the program in terms of lighting and bird safe design, and think about how you could do that all in a neighborhood scale and really have an impact. And think about certain plant species that you might plant in abundance and continuity across the neighborhood. So that's been pretty fascinating for me. And that's our little spot.
It has also been a good after-school project and has been fun to connect with neighbors some more. Some of the most vibrant flowering plants we've used have been common yarrow, golden yarrow, showy penstemon, redbud, iris, multiple types of poppies, fuchsia, bloodgrass, and native milkweed. Another big part has been seeing the different animals thrive using these native plants that could not have just been using regular grass. For example, ladybugs, bumblebees, milkweed bugs, Jerusalem crickets, and even slender salamanders. We made a milkweed patch that immediately attracted monarch butterflies, leading to caterpillars and chrysalises. Thanks for listening. We'd be happy to hear your own experiences and questions.
Thank you. I think hopefully we actually do have maybe a little time for questions.
We do. So let's see if we have any questions in the chat. And I guess I would ask, how do you think that people watching this presentation can get started if we all don't have a Joey and Leo in our house? Like, how would you motivate the neighbors and like make this happen?
Right. I think it's a good question. And certainly, yeah, their energy and enthusiasm. Yeah, Joey just spontaneously dug up Don's across the street a few weeks ago. Just he had some time after school. That has been a real driver. I think there's a more organized way to approach it. This has been just sort of synergistic or, casually has expanded. I think the way I would do it if I was thinking at scale or, starting from scratch would be maybe get everybody together and see who's interested, and then think about who has what resources or abilities or time, and how we could work together, to do the different steps that are required. How do you get the plants? Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to do that? So I think there's a way to do that that's probably a little more organized than how we approached it. But it does help if somebody has time and energy to be a catalyst. I don't think that has to be, and I don't know how old they were when they started, but it could be anybody. And I think it certainly has, and then more people join in as you get more momentum. So it doesn't all fall on anyone's shoulders.
And you had mentioned, I think, that some people brought in some natives to their backyard, like it was more than just letting the boys tackle the parking strips, but it's sort of grown beyond that. Is that right, Joey?
Yeah, because the neighbors on our next door neighbors have really just without us, a little bit more without us doing it, have also incorporated natives into their yard, front and back.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of folks are, open to doing natives, but aren't necessarily, that ready to, have the time or energy to figure out what they would be and go get them and stuff. And so removing that hurdle of like what would make sense. Also, just it's interesting. It has sort of served as a little visual library for people, kind of like what you do with the tour. You're like, well, I would like that. I'd like some of those. That looks nice. That's clearly doing fine, and it's quite pretty. And if that's a native plant, all the better. So I think it's been a good, little marketing advertising for native plants, just them being there.
They're very attractive. Do you parking strips are not easy to plant and have look good. Do you have any particular recommendations for plants that do well in parking strips and look good in parking strips?
Do you have thoughts? What's worked best, Joey?
Well, just in definitely planting the big sagebrushes have really done well. They have grown a lot, and yeah, they kind of fit nice. And just putting down some poppy seeds have worked really well.
Yeah, I know we have relied on it for kind of a set of backbone species that have been most successful and have taken up space nicely, and not we're not the best maintainers. I would say we're not out there all the time. So these have done well, pretty independently without a whole lot of much watering or whole lot of maintenance, which I think is probably a good, makes it more replicable. But yeah, it's true, this having some larger shrubs that are just really reliable and effective has been nice as the backbone, those sagebrushes and manzanitas. And then a lot of success with the fuchsia, with some lower stuff, the fuchsia and the blue-eyed grass, and then some yarrow, and then mixing into milkweed and the penstemons and some kind of showier, pollinator-oriented plants. Yeah, the golden yarrow has been nice. Yeah, but some things certainly haven't made it, but those have all done well.
Yeah, a few questions actually came up about maintenance and watering. You probably did have to water in the beginning when you established the plants. How'd you do that? Just go out there with a watering can every week, or?
Well, I feel like I'm not sure, but we mostly just watered it like right after we planted them. We gave them like a really big water, and so then they got kind of like situated, and yeah, but I don't think it didn't take that much maintenance.
Yeah, we haven't watered them that much. I think some of the neighbors maybe occasionally give them some water, when in the really dry, long, hot seasons. But when we planted them a little too late in the spring, like now, we definitely had to water them to keep them alive that first year. But after that, they've been pretty much on their own.
Yeah.
That means we have lost a few things here and there, but things that have survived have been pretty much with little or no water.
Yeah, the poppies are definitely troopers like that. Like they need no care. Neglect is what they like. Somebody actually asked where your pollinator corridor is in Berkeley, but I don't even know the address.
Sorry, I know I meant to should have put a map. It's at Fulton and Russell.
I see that Jessica posted, just in case everybody's not monitoring the chat, as an aside for folks who are planning unconventional native plant gardens, sidewalks, traffic circles, public schools. I'm writing a grant this weekend for the native gardens that I installed and am caring for at my house of worship. And I am looking for other folks who want to support getting native plants into unconventional spaces. If you're interested in partnering, feel free to text me or email me. And so her contact information is in the chat. It's Jessica Dickinson Goodman. And it's also jessica.dickinson.goodman@gmail.com if you want to reach out to Jessica. I do know of 2 other projects like this that were neighborhood-based projects. And one of them was on the garden tour last year. If you want to read up on it, if you view the 2022 gardens under Find a Garden, that was Victoria's Garden in Oakland. And that was a neighborhood project where 15 homes offered part of their front yards as a memorial to a neighbor who had died. And it was planted with local native plants. And also there's another one on the tour this year, that's Anita Pereira's garden in Richmond, where Anita and 2 of her neighbors have native plant gardens. So there are 3 native plant gardens within just a couple of houses of each other. And they have gotten other neighbors to let them use their parking strips or plant in their front yards. They've held neighborhood tours of their gardens, and you see many more natives in the neighborhood now than you used to. So you might want to check out Anita Pereira's in Richmond if you're interested in this sort of community gardening idea. Thank you, Joey and Robin, for making the presentation, showing your project. I'd heard Robin give a talk on this project a year or 2 ago, and always had it in mind. And I thought one day I'm just going to drive past and look at it. And when I did, and I saw the plants in the parking strip, I stopped. I was taking pictures and took notes and knocked on Robin's door unexpectedly. And it was just a great project and a wonderful model. So I applaud you for doing it, and I hope it's something that spreads.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, it's really neat to hear those other neighborhood projects that are taking shape, because yeah, it's neat to see you can do a certain amount on your own little footprint, but then when it starts multiplying.
I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Really going to have a big effect. Thanks, Kathy.
ask if you are watching today and haven't had a chance yet to make a donation, if you'll please support the tour. You can do it on the tour's website under Please Donate. You can Venmo a contribution to @Bringing Back the Natives. We depend upon donations to keep going, and we hope that if you've enjoyed our presentation, that you will help us to keep this event going.